Ernesto woke up one spring morning with a mixture of fear and determination. That same dawn in which the chirping of birds seemed to accompany his thoughts reminded him that, despite the pain and the difficulties, every day was a new beginning. Sitting on the edge of the bed in his small hotel room, he watched the light that timidly filtered through the window as a sign that life, at times, could also reserve miracles. That morning he decided that he would honor his mother's sacrifice in the words of Lorenzo, the man who had welcomed him like a son. In the days that followed, Ernesto immersed himself in his work with an even deeper dedication. Every corner of the hotel bore his imprint, from the meticulous cleaning he performed with love, to the silent respect for each guest who, unaware of his troubled past, found in him a reassuring presence. Yet, behind every gesture, there was a story of suffering and rebirth, a vivid memory of Marta and everything she had lost in order to find herself again. During the breaks, Chiara, the HR manager, and Serena, with her elegant but welcoming manner, began to spend time with him. Their chats, initially formal, soon turned into real friendly conversations, in which they talked about dreams, the past, and that uncertain future that, for Ernesto, finally seemed to be glimpsed. "Ernesto, have you ever thought about taking a training course?" Chiara asked him one afternoon, while they were drinking tea together in the small refreshment corner of the hotel. "You have an inner strength that could take you far, if only I gave you the opportunity to learn something new." Ernesto looked down, thinking of those years of giving up his dreams for necessity. "I know, but it seems like a luxury, don't you think?" he replied, with a bitter smile. "Maybe, but it's never too late to start," Serena replied, with that reassuring calm that only those who have lived 1,000 lives can convey. Thus, driven by a sudden impulse and the desire to give meaning to his path, Ernesto enrolled in an evening course in mechanics and repairs. It was not a conventional choice, but it reflected his need to become independent, to build a future in which he could finally decide where to go and how to live. Among dusty books and rusty tools, he learned about a new world, that of machines and technology, which gave him the feeling of being able to repair not only old engines, but also the fragments of his past. Meanwhile, the relationship with Lorenzo deepened. The man who had revealed such a surprising secret became a point of reference. The conversations between the two, often animated by long reflections on life, had taken on the tone of a sincere confession. One evening, as they sat in a quiet corner of the hotel bar, Lorenzo began to talk about the past that had marked him. "You know, Ernesto," he said in a low and slightly trembling voice, "I too have had to face difficult times. I have lost a lot in life, and I have not been able to find that bond that gave me strength. When I met Marta, I felt such a great love that I wanted to share it with those around me. And now, seeing you, I feel I can repay at least in part that debt of the soul." Ernesto listened in silence, moved by the sincerity of the man who had welcomed him at a time when he himself felt abandoned. Lorenzo's words made him understand that, even in the deepest wounds, there was room for forgiveness, for rebirth, and for love in all its forms. As time passed, the Mediterraneo Hotel transformed into a small microcosm of hopes and intertwined stories. Matteo, Lorenzo's son, initially cold and distrustful, began to look at Ernesto with different eyes. One afternoon, during a coffee break on the hotel's panoramic terrace, Matteo approached with an uncertain air. "You know, Ernesto," he said in a more mature voice than he had shown in the past, "I've noticed how committed you are. I'd like to know what drives you to fight like this every day." Ernesto smiled, remembering all the difficulties and small victories of his life. "It's a promise I made to myself, and especially to my mother," he replied. "She taught me that even when it seems like the world is falling apart, you have to find the strength to get up again. Every difficulty is an opportunity to start over." That conversation gave birth to a sincere respect in Matteo, transforming an initially cold relationship into a true friendship. The two began to spend time together, talking about ambitions, unrealized dreams, and how, despite everything, life could surprise with new possibilities. Matteo, with his education and his enterprising spirit, became a guide for Ernesto, an example to follow and, at times, a confidant. But along the way there were difficulties. The old scars of life returned to make themselves felt in the lonely nights and in the moments when memories of a bitter past resurfaced with force. One evening, with the silence of the hotel broken only by the sound of distant footsteps, Ernesto found himself walking aimlessly along the nearby beach. The ocean, dark and imposing, seemed to reflect the turbulence of his soul. He stopped, watching the waves crash against the rocks, and whispered to the wind, "Mom, I'm still trying to understand who I am now." At that moment, a figure emerged from the darkness. It was an old fisherman, his face marked by years of toil and wisdom. "Boy," said the man, slowly approaching, "the sea teaches that every wave, however violent, gives way to a calm after the storm. You must not fear the past, but embrace it and let it become a part of you." Those words, simple and direct, penetrated Ernesto's heart. He treasured the fisherman's advice, learning to see in his suffering an opportunity for growth. So he decided to write down his journey, transforming painful memories into a diary of rebirth. Each page, written with a worn but determined pen, was a tribute to his mother, a sincere story of the daily struggle against destiny. The diary became a life companion for him, a silent witness to his transformations. The words, written with passion and a hint of melancholy, told of nights spent questioning the meaning of existence, of days in which every effort seemed a step toward an unattainable goal. But also of those small victories, an unexpected smile, an outstretched hand, a sincere hug that reminded him that, despite everything, he was never alone. As the months passed, the positive energy that surrounded the Mediterraneo Hotel spread beyond its walls. Ernesto's stories became a source of inspiration for many. In a small corner of the lounge, during an evening organized to celebrate the hotel's anniversary, a guest, a famous local writer, approached him and confided, "Your story, that of a boy who was able to transform pain into strength, touched me deeply. I would like to tell it to the world, because in you there is proof that courage can be born even in the most desperate situations." Ernesto, surprised and moved, accepted the offer. Thus an unexpected project was born, a book that intertwined his life with the stories of the other guests of the hotel, a mosaic of experiences that spoke of hope, resilience, and the human capacity to reinvent oneself. Together with Chiara, Serena, and Matteo, he began to work on this ambitious story, dedicating entire evenings to interviews, stories, and moments of pure sharing. Every testimony, every anecdote collected, enriched that book with surprising and sincere details. There were stories of lost and found loves, of silent sacrifices and small daily revolutions. Writing became for Ernesto a way to reconstruct his past and, at the same time, to project himself towards a bright future, where every written word was a brick to build a new existence. And so, as the pages of the book piled up, Ernesto's life continued to change. Every day brought with it new challenges, but also new joys. The small hotel room was no longer just a refuge, it had become a symbol of rebirth, of a life that, despite the scars, knew how to make space among the beauties and difficulties of the world. Ernesto's path was far from linear. Between moments of despair and moments of renewed hope, he had learned that true strength lies in the ability to accept and reinvent oneself. The past, with all its shadows, had become an integral part of his being, but no longer his jailer. Every memory of Marta, every word of comfort from Lorenzo, every smile exchanged with Matteo or Chiara, was a precious piece in the construction of a future that, slowly, was taking shape with increasingly bright contours. And as the book took shape, its pages soaked in tears and laughter, Ernesto understood that life, however difficult, always offered the possibility of a second chance. A chance to rewrite one's own story, to embrace one's own fragilities and transform them into a source of strength. And, above all, to recognize that the most authentic bonds are not broken by distance or time, but are strengthened by the care and love that nourish them. Thus, as the days passed and new seasons arrived, Ernesto continued to live, no longer as Marta's son, but as the man who, despite starting from a destiny marked by pain, had been able to find the light in the darkness and transform it into a guide for himself and for those who, like him, sought to rediscover the beauty of life.